Hello, freedom-loving Canadians. Do you think Canada should hand over more decision-making power to international bureaucracies? Just last month, the Canadian federal government quietly handed over more control to the WHO, the World Health Organization, without even a debate in Parliament. The government accepted the WHO's new health regulations, which means they have agreed to the WHO to determine when a new global health emergency exists, to dictate policy responses, and to demand that Canada report back to them. Does this sound problematic to you? Today, we released a brand new report called Canada's Surrender of Sovereignty. New WHO health regulations undermine Canadian democracy and charter freedoms. This new report examines how the new regulations undermine Canadian democracy and sovereignty. My name is Benjamin Klassen. I'm a research and education coordinator at the Justice Centre, and I'm joined by Nigel Hannaford, who wrote this report. Mr. Hannaford just told me that a fun fact, last month marked 50 years since he entered the news industry. And many of you know him from the Western Standard, where he hosts his successful and widely loved Hannaford show. Some of you may also know that he was formerly the manager of the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's speechwriting unit. Mr. Hannaford, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Pleased to be here. This is a really important subject, so there's lots to discuss.
Well, then let's get on with it. So why don't we just unpack first, what are the international health regulations and what came with the new amendments that you find problematic?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think it would be very hard to argue that the nations of the world should not cooperate with each other in the event of a widespread emergency. The question is, what emergencies are we talking about? And exactly how that cooperation is organized, and whether there could ever be anything further that we should be concerned about, like our own sovereignty or personal freedoms. And I think the recent experience with COVID showed us just how all of those things come together. But let me say that in objecting to the terms of the World Health Organization's international health regulations, which is what we're talking about here this morning, I'm not saying that the nations of the world should not cooperate. All right? Of course, we're going to try and help each other.
Yeah.
That would be the right thing to do. But the international health regulations are the codified rules under which the World Health Organization exerts its leadership in the event of a medical emergency. Now, it's supposed to be voluntary, and it has to be voluntary if you think about it, because the World Health Organization doesn't have an army. So anything that is agreed to is just a handshake and a promise. Nevertheless, the language is written in such a way that people would think that there was some element of obligation, some compulsion, some penalty to be paid if the rules are not followed. Now, this goes back to 2007. This just didn't happen yesterday. And the regulations which define how we all work together in the event of a medical emergency have been upgraded before. I say upgraded, renegotiated, adjusted. You learn as you go along. After COVID, actually during COVID, people got together in New York and said, I think we need more power to direct and to control than we have as the regulations are at the moment. So let's talk. And for the next 2 years, this was like from December of 2021 to, I think it was around about April of 2024.
Okay.
These negotiations took place and a new set of international health regulations were drafted. And there was a funny, you know how sometimes when your cable bill arrives, they'll tell you that if we don't hear anything from you, we're putting your rates up.
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's called a negative option.
Uh-huh.
And that's what came with this new version.
So if you don't opt out,
If you don't opt out, then you're assumed to have bought the new package.
mm-hmm.
Now, out of the 196 countries who are part of this,
Mm-hmm.
11 opted out.
Wow.
One was the United States, and they said basically what I said just now. This is the words of Robert F. Kennedy we quoted in the report, but basically what he said, of course we're going to cooperate, but we're not going to surrender sovereignty, so we're not part of this anymore. Canada also opted out, but, and there's a big but here, they love it. And all that's at issue, and they say this in the respectful terms of the diplomats use, how much they appreciate the work of the World Health Organization, the leadership provided by the organization, and the usefulness of the regulations. And there's just one little thing about access to pathogens that we need to sort out. And once that's sorted out, everything will be fine, and we're in. Now, there's a lot of use of the word binding. The word binding is in the in the
amendments,
in the regulations. Well, it was always there. Yeah.
Oh, it was always there.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. But I mean, but then you think, well, who are they to bind us? We're Canada. We do what we want. Well, the Canadian government, in its own releases, and we quote what they say in the you know. Public Health Agency Canada is actually the sort of the lead government unit on all of this. And then there's stuff they say we consider these binding on Canada. So what is binding? What is going to be binding? You were probably going to ask me that next. What is new in the revised international health regulations is that they would issue temporary recommendations for action. Temporary meaning 3 months. Now it sounds temporary. After
temporary recommendations.
Yes,
that are binding though.
But they're binding.
I see. So they're
really they're instructions.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to.
They're written as instructions. They're given to you as instructions. You must obey. But then they're like, oh, they're recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and this may well be things that would be very natural to do anyway. But unfortunately, there's a number of problems with them. Getting into the details of it. I mean, the first and the largest problem, and I think the one that ought to have made the government of Canada just say, you know, we'll just stay with the one. We're going to do what the Americans did. We'll. It didn't work out so well for us when we followed World Health Organization guidance during the COVID instructions. Now, I suspect that in some cases, the government of Canada was quite glad to have somebody else telling them what they should be doing. Because then if people didn't like it, they could say, well, you know, we're guided by this very respectable international health regulations of the World Health Organization. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Of course, we follow their instructions, and if they recommend, as they did, that something be put in place for travelers, an isolation hotel upon their return. Well, that was wasn't us. That's the United Nations, you know.
So they can skirt accountability.
Absolutely, and they did. And when they didn't skirt accountability that way, they passed it off to the provinces, who of course just looked back and said, well, we're just doing what we told you to do.
Yeah, so that was one of the things, one of the senses that I got from the report is that you argue that Canada is surrendering its sovereignty, it's handing over more power and control to this international agency, the World Health Organization. But in reality, it's not like the power of our federal government is necessarily weakened. As soon as they don't like a certain directive from the WHO, they could maybe be like, well, we're just not going to act on that because we're a sovereign nation. But the WHO can declare an emergency. They now have the power within the regulations that they are the ones deciding when an emergency exists.
That's a key point, by the way. That is a key point. Before, under the old system, Canada had to sort of accept that it was an emergency. Now, the Director General of the World Health Organization will say there is an emergency, and we have apparently agreed that we won't contest that. We will accept that.
Right.
And there is now a higher level of emergency that they have coined. It's called the pandemic emergency. This is beyond a medical emergency of international concern, which is the one that they operated under before. Now they've got this extra one.
Oh, so they needed more power in case countries didn't listen.
Yeah, exactly. So,
that's very interesting.
You have to understand, Ben, that Canada has a long history of internationalism. Multilateralism is the phrase they toss around in Ottawa, but they like the idea of international cooperation. And as I said at the beginning, maybe we should be ready and willing to cooperate with international neighbors of goodwill. However, it is something of a fetish in government circles in Ottawa. They just love it. If I may just be off topic for about 25 seconds.
Yeah, of course.
You did mention that I worked in the Prime Minister's office, and I had 6 years then to ask all the questions that, as a journalist for the previous 34 years, I'd never had an opportunity to ask, or if I did, I never got the answers. And so I didn't abuse my position, but when an excuse came up to inquire, I would certainly. And one day I asked the Privy Council office, which is my point of connection to the wider civil service, said, how many treaties are we committed to? Like, the UN has been out there since the end of the war. I mean, time's gone by. I know this one, this one, this one. How many are there, for heaven's sake? And I waited a day, and then I finally got a phone call back, and they said, well, here's a list of a few, but we actually don't have. We can't answer that question.
Because they didn't have a comprehensive list.
Certainly nothing that was accessible to the Prime Minister's office.
Wow.
Which
the one office that should be able to get such information.
Well, that's a story in itself. But there are many treaties that we sign, and the reason that this is important to the international health regulations is that these treaties are, once they are ratified, they do become a point of reference for Canadian jurists.
Right.
So they will say, well, if we signed a treaty to ban Smarties and we have a corner store selling Smarties, they obviously must be in breach of international law. You know, now that's obviously a silly example, but when you get into some of the other areas that these treaties cover, like land use, protection of species, my word, just the protection of species, you can do all sorts of things under the umbrella of that, which really interfere with people's lives, with industrial development, with exploration, and. So now we come back to the international health regulations, and we suddenly find that we have somebody in New York who will say, no arguments, we've got a big one. We have a pandemic emergency, and here are my temporary recommendations, which you have bound yourself to.
I was thinking, because you did mention that in the report that Canada has signed on to many treaties previously, and I was thinking about that, how this accepting these new amendments that take an increasingly approach that is increasingly more oriented towards enforcement, that this is more a sign of the government's increasingly globalist approach to to international cooperation. It's not just about international cooperation. It is about I don't know. I guess enforcing a little bit of a globalist view. What
It totally
are your thoughts
is.
on that?
But I mean, that is. Don't forget, you've got the elected politicians, and then you've also got an embedded civil service, and the multilateralism is kind of the accepted norm. It's so accepted that it's not even discussed.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And then people like the Justice Center come along and say, well, why are we doing this? Well, it's because we have treaties and we cooperate with people. What are you saying we shouldn't be doing that? And we say, well, maybe we should, but maybe we should be doing it under slightly different terms or with greater knowledge of what it is that we are doing. You know, just for one example, some of the provisions in the international health regulations, and we have an excellent analysis in this document, by the way, from our friend and colleague Alison Pejovic. They are potentially going to infringe on charter rights.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that a bit. I thought that was an excellent analysis of charter infringements there. So obviously the WHO is going to then declare when a pandemic emergency exists. And then on top of that, they will also say what countries are supposed to, what policy responses they're supposed to implement. So what are some of the potential charter infringements that you see are key here?
Well, let's look at four of them. First of all, there's the whole loss of national autonomy, and I'm actually I think it's good for this audience if we just quote directly from the report.
Yeah, of course,
because this Alison explains this beautifully, and and she writes that under the international health regulations, the World Health Organization may unilaterally declare an even higher level of alert. This we were talking about this a moment ago. A pandemic emergency, obliging member states to higher levels of compliance. There's the sovereignty issue again. She says that this would erode sovereignty if Canada acts merely on the World Health Organization's command without a Canadian legislative basis. Any rights restriction risks being unconstitutional. So if they say we need to close your borders, or we can't close the borders, but everybody who enters or leaves must go into quarantine for a period of time, which is what happened before, then, well, what is the constitutional basis for that under Canadian law? And by the way, it's worth noting, I noticed that you said that this came in September without parliamentary debate. That is correct. It is considered that it is just upgrading regulations under an existing arrangement. The thing that was established in 2007, it's all administrative. Okay, cross out this, substitute that. We're doing this now, and it does not actually require.
So updates to the IHR don't necessarily require parliamentary debate, but initially adopting the IHR, the International Health Regulations, did require parliamentary debate. Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay, but that doesn't mean that the International Health Regulations necessarily became law in Canada.
The treaty was ratified back in 2007. But since then, it's just, as I say, they go in and they make changes, and there has not been any. Well, I scoured Hansard for looking for places where this had even been discussed, and in 20 years, there's barely been more than the odd parliamentary question asked, to which the answer has always been, there it is, take it or leave it, It's not a big deal to everybody. Like, how often do we get a pandemic? That's the first thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And second thing, you're talking airy-fairy, like you and I get talking about constitutions. And I can see your temperature is rising, okay? And everybody in the JCCF takes this very, very seriously, and they jolly well should. But, in Ottawa, gosh, got bigger things to worry about, like when a minister is spent too much money on orange juice or something like that. That's what makes this fun. Look,
Yeah.
three other things quickly on this.
Yeah. Okay. So before you get to the next two, or I did just want to quickly make a comment or go back to what we talked about earlier a little bit. Is that, in my estimation, from what it seemed to me, is that in ceding over sovereignty and national, sovereignty and control to the WHO, it's not necessarily that it's making the federal government, like, let's say, less weak, or that they will have less power. It could actually mean that they have more power with less accountability, where they might otherwise not be willing to impose, let's say, certain lockdowns or travel restrictions. But now, because the WHO gives them this rule or recommendation that they're supposed to, now they are doing it, even though they otherwise would not yet have, because it might not have been popular. And now, in addition to imposing such rules sooner, they can now also skirt accountability. So my point is, it actually is more about government accountability than surrendering national sovereignty. What do you make of that?
Well, I actually think that I think that is, to the degree that they think about it at all, probably what they think. Well, this will be handy. I mean, we've already seen a glimmer of this. And I talk about it in the report here, but Dr. Theresa Tam has come in for a good deal of criticism over the years. But up until the time that she was told to shape up or ship out, she actually had a fairly moderate view of what COVID meant, and had the advice that she offered before the national emergency was declared been followed, then we would have had a different experience. She briefed the parliamentary committee. Every area of parliament has a committee to look after. So there's a health committee. So they said, look, we hear there's things coming, nasty something or other going on in China. Is this coming anywhere close to us? She goes to the committee. She testifies. She's questioned quite extensively.
Yeah.
And she played it down at that point and said, look, what we don't know everything about this, but what we do know is that older people are more vulnerable than younger people, who are, in fact, hardly vulnerable at all.
Yeah, which was later controversial to talk about.
Right.
To say.
And somebody mentioned masks, and she said, oh, well, they won't do you any good. And that was her initial position. That was in February of 2020. Now, that you will probably recognize those themes from your friends who contrived the Great Barrington Declaration. Dr. Bhattacharya, I know, has been used by to provide expert testimony in COVID cases with the JCC, and that's what he said. Look, what you got to do is look after the vulnerable community. That's old people like me, and let young people like you go out and pay taxes. You know, like, be sensible here.
Yeah.
But instead, we got a very different, and it
became political.
It became the World Health Organization's view that we needed to close down the economy.
So we had a sensible approach until the WHO came in and declared an emergency of public health, or public health emergency of international concern, which was a lesser emergency than what they now have the authority to declare.
The pandemic one is new. That's that's kind of gold level emergency preparedness. But they had what they had, and they did what they did. And by the way, Tam stuck to her thing on the masks until probably May of 2020.
Was that after the mask mandates had been imposed already? Wow. And then eventually she changed her.
Of course she did.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So just after we have, had such a terrific, in the worst sense of the word, experience with COVID and the WHO guiding our guidelines, now we decided to hand over even more control to them.
Yeah,
So,
well, I mean, this is what Alison is saying here, and freedom of mobility, she writes about that.
yeah.
The regulations already provide for travel restrictions, vaccination mandates, and health certification requirements. This, of course, is background material for the convoy.
Yeah.
These conflict with Section 6 of the Charter, which guarantees citizens the right to enter, remain in, and leave Canada. You know, so there is the potential for the in this sort of gold level pandemic, maybe even under the silver level one that we've already experienced. Say, you know, we have to have a complete ban on people crossing borders for a period of time. They could say something like that.
Yeah.
Well, if Canada tries to put that into effect,
Yeah.
then the person who is affected may well have a charter claim that his right to mobility has been violated. Alison could put this much more technically and accurately than I am portraying it, but it goes on privacy and bodily autonomy. Do you want? Does the government have a right to insist that you are vaccinated? We saw a situation where they conceded that they couldn't make you, but if you didn't, you would be fired.
Yeah.
So that's
it's
kind of quite an incentive.
It's a free choice, but if you choose not to get vaccinated, then you'll just be punished.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So really,
terrific free choice.
And all of this is kind of validated.
Yeah. Okay, so do the international health regulations also apply to provinces? So it's the federal government that has chosen not to reject them or silently adopt them. And we're talking about how it could infringe on Canadians' charter freedom to mobility, as in like leave Canada and return to Canada. And that is federal responsibility, international travel. How about visiting your grandma, on a school break or something like that, or hosting a birthday party for your 5-year-old kids or something like that, and which is more a provincial thing. So do these international health regulations also apply to provincial governments, or?
Yeah, short answer is yes, but they apply vicariously through the the Public Health Agency of Canada.
Okay.
So Canada binds itself. They use the word bind. It's unfortunate. If that is the message they want to send, well, at least they're being honest about it. If it's not the message that they want to send, it's an unfortunate choice of word.
Right.
But they basically are accepting all of this and saying, listen, if you press the little red button and say we've got a pandemic or something of international concern, then we're just going to wait for the facts with our temporary recommendations that we're going to do, and the relationship within Canada is that the provinces take their leadership from PHAC, Public Health Agency of Canada. There is some. They theoretically do have some power to say, well, yes and no, but it's a hard one for given the nature of politics and people always trying to claim advantage somebody else. It's a very hard thing to actually insist that we will not do this because we think it's wrong. I mean, we had some strange situations during COVID where I've often quoted this example. In British Columbia, they closed the churches and kept the restaurants open.
Oh, yeah.
And in Alberta, they kept the churches open and closed the restaurants. Well, I mean, I don't know which you prefer, but the point is, it's the same virus, and they have this. So the provinces do have a certain amount of discretion, and I would hope that, especially where you get strong-minded provincial leaders, that they would try to make the decisions that they thought were best. But in the end, the province is a creature of the Constitution, and if the constitutionally appointed federal authority has said, well, we're going to accept this, and then it very much weakens the position of the provinces to do anything different.
Right. So they might not necessarily be legally obligated to, but there is a lot of pressure.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
And don't forget that the people who are in charge of these things, there are some very perverse incentives.
Yeah.
Like this is actually an important point when people are looking back and excuse me, passing judgment on who did what during the COVID outbreak.
Uh-huh.
If you are a civil servant in the health administration,
right,
you could do as Dr. Tam did when she testified in February of 2020 to that parliamentary committee and offer a nuanced, sensible approach to the problem.
Yeah.
But what if you get it wrong? Or what if there is something that you could not possibly have foreseen? So the temptation is to say, we have to lock all the doors and throw away the key.
Yeah,
then we will be safe.
At least you did something then. You can
And then you can say, as the civil servant,
yeah,
well, I gave my best advice. There's nothing else that we could possibly have done. You know, where's the bowl of water? I wash my hands. Okay?
Coming back to that accountability part.
Yes. All right. So those are the kinds of pressures on the civil servants. Meanwhile, you've got the politicians. Now, the politicians don't have special knowledge of anything. But sometimes, well, no, that's not it. I'm not taking, like if you're a car dealer in Kamloops and you're elected as MLA or as a, you know a lot about selling cars, but a health emergency comes along and now you're just relying on plain common sense and ideology. So you want to go head to head with your provincial health mandarin who is saying we need to do this. And you say, well, no, that seems a bit extreme. Well, I mean, are you going to take my advice or are you going to go with your own internet researches? You know, it's a, you see,
they're the experts there.
So there's a lot of the incentive for the politician who wants to get reelected is to say, well, you know, we have these people to give us advice and we believe they give us good advice, so we're going with what they say. It's a very brave politician who says under the Charter of Rights, people have these rights to mobility, to assemble, to go to church, to go to a restaurant. That's where, you know, and they don't need to wear masks. Well, you'd better be right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're not, then you're out of office.
You certainly are. So those are the, so I think that in our consideration of COVID in the past, we have been harsh on a lot of people.
Yeah.
And some people we definitely needed to be harsh about because I think that but we didn't give adequate consideration to the pressures that they were under. So in the sort of open glow of the thing receding in the past, I'm prepared to be a little bit more generous to some of the people whose reputations were thoroughly slagged. Nevertheless, going forward, what we're talking about here is an upgraded version of restriction and coercion, courtesy of the World Health Organization in its new international health regulations, which has real implications for charter rights in Canada. And that's where organizations like the Justice Centre come in to try and force to protect citizens from the overwhelming power of the state, which may be used, and in my opinion has been misused for purposes other than strictly health. It was about control. It was about saving people's reputations. And if there was a lot of damage done, as there was, well, somebody else would pay for it.
Yeah. And with these international health regulations, and that's very helpful. And with these international health regulations, politicians are only going to face even greater pressures to abide by what the WHO says and enforce charter infringing policies. So if Canada had not signed on to, and this is the last question that I'll ask, if Canada had not signed on to the new or accepted the new amendments to the international health regulations, in what ways would Canada have been able or been less able to respond adequately to a true pandemic emergency? And my point is, other countries like the United States rejected those regulations. And if a pandemic emergency truly comes up, they will, of course, also respond to it, but they are just not obliged to follow the WHO regulations, whereas Canada has agreed to follow them. So what's the difference there? And what do you recommend?
Well, what I recommend is in the conclusion here, which is that we get out of this.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually not in it yet. Remember
Right.
what I said at the first? We love
We've
it. We want to sign it. There's just this thing that we have to get
Procedural
sorted
thing,
out.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Once that's dealt with, they want in. Well, I'm saying, let's not. Let's not sign that. We would still be, if we want to be bound, we would still be bound.
So
by the previous ones, and we would not be obliged to accept the World Health Organization's judgment that this super pandemic level of threat now exists. We would have discretion over whether we cared to think of it that way or not. And maybe we would. I mean, but that's the point. That's Canadian sovereignty. We make the decision.
Yeah.
And that is what our government seems unfathomably willing to relinquish.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying that even though Canada has told the WHO, we love it, we agree with it, and we will sign on to it in the future, there's still some hope. Like we can still reject it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but we have to want to reject it.
We have to read it.
And at the moment, they don't.
Yeah.
And if something were to happen now, they would respond, I believe, and I'm going on what I've observed, and the same thing that you have observed over the years. They would respond in the spirit because they like multilateralism, and they think that world cooperation is a good thing, and that the World Health Organization is a good thing. Let me just see if I can. Maybe this would be a good point upon which to relinquish the microphone, but Kennedy's words should be here. In which
where he comments on why the United States is rejecting the international health regulations.
That's right. So this is okay. So this is the U.S. Health Secretary, RFK. Right. The proposed amendments to the international health regulations open the door to the kind of, now get this, to the kind of narrative management, propaganda, and censorship that we saw during the COVID pandemic. We did see that. He's an American, but they saw it there. We saw it here. He can say this. It's very hard for us to say that because it is denied. Kennedy concluded the United States can cooperate with other nations without jeopardizing our civil liberties, without undermining our Constitution, and without ceding away America's treasured sovereignty. And that, Ben, I would love to hear a Canadian politician say and mean it. Wow.
That was very good. I think that's a good note to end it on, unless you have any other.
No, I think I've detained you long enough.
No, well, I've learned a lot. It was a delight. Thank you very much, Nigel. And well, there you have it, folks. We can cooperate internationally without infringing on our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This is an absolute of a delight to read this report. You can find this report on our website at jccf.ca. You do not want to miss it. So go there, check it out, and we'll see you here again in a couple of weeks discussing what's the next report?
Oh, gosh. We are going to be talking about the PSYOPs operation within the Privy Council office, in which I will be asserting that the present government tries to not merely govern people, but influence the kind of people we are to become. It's fascinating what this government gets up to.
That is absolutely fascinating.
This is new. Harper didn't do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh. And I don't even know that former governments before him did it, but this government has a definite view on what kind of people Canadians should be. And by a shove here and a push there and a little bit of nudging, which is what the It's the impact in the impact office within the PCO.
Yeah.
They're definitely trying to change the Canadian way of thinking.
Yeah. There are certain views that are quote unquote unacceptable views. Yeah, lots of questions arise, but instead of getting into it, we'll get into it in a couple of weeks. So hit that subscribe button and the follow button, and we'll see you here soon.